Okay, in this video, I shall be helping you understand the biology syllabus for Jamb 2026 and furthermore until it is being reviewed. So here we have that of biology, that's biology Jamb syllabus, and then we have general objectives where they say that the aim of this UTME syllabus in biology is to prepare you, that's to prepare candidates for the board's examination. It is designed to test the achievement of the course objectives, which are to demonstrate sufficient knowledge of the concept of the interdependence and unity of life, account for continuity of life through organization, inheritance, and evolution, and apply biological principles and concepts to everyday life, especially to matters affecting the individual, society, environment, community health, and the economy. All right, so those are what this is all about. Like this whole syllabus and this whole test is based on you being able to, that's they are trying to evaluate you according to these objectives. All right, and then we have the detailed syllabus. It's actually divided into three parts. We have A to E. So A, we have variety of organisms, we have forms and functions. C, we have ecology, then we have D, genetics, then E, we have evolution. All right, so I'm going to help you understand the syllabus because in preparing for an exam, you need to understand the syllabus so that you have a direction. You don't read without direction. Reading should be vector and not scalar. All right, so physics students should know what I'm talking about. Okay, so A now, where we have variety of organisms, we have number one living organisms. We have characteristics, cell structure, and functions of cell component. Then C, we have level of organization. That's from cell, tissue to organ to system and to organisms. Alright, so under this chapter now, you should be able to differentiate between characteristics of living and non-living things. Then you should take note of virus. The virus we know is a midline or borderline between living and non-living things, right? Then you should be able to identify the cell structure, that's diagrammatic representation of the cell. All right, you could try for different organisms, you should be able to analyze the function of the component of plants and animal cells. All right, so first of all, you have to know the component before you be able to analyze the functions of these components. All right, so you can see that it's bringing out a lot of points for you to take note of. All right, then you should be able to compare and contrast the structure of plant and animal cells. Yeah, know what is common, the similarities and the differences between plant and animal cells. All right, know that okay, plant cells, cell wall, animal cells, cell membrane, and all that. We have a lot of them. Presence and absence of chloroplast and a lot of them. Then you should be able to trace the level of organization among organisms. Right, so this is under that section C among organisms in their logical sequence in relation to the five kingdom classification of living organisms. That's what this is trying to say is when we have, we have our five kingdom classification of living organisms. So you should be able to identify, okay, at this kingdom we have just cells, at this kingdom we have tissues, here we have organs, here we have system. That's just what it's trying to say. You should be able to trace the level of organization. All right, so we know for the kingdom Monera, we have the blue green algae, we have bacteria. All right, so that is in the cell aspect. All right, then when we come to kingdom Animalia, you are talking of organisms. So you should be able to trace the level of organization among organisms, their logical sequence in relation to the five kingdom classification of living organisms. Then number two, that's chapter two under this section A. We have evolution among the following. All right, so this is apart from just trying to give us the evolution, it is still trying to help us know more about the five kingdom classification of living organisms, where we have Monera, Protista, Fungi, Plantae, and Animalia. All right, so for A now, where we have Monera, we know Moneras are prokaryotes, the rest are eukaryotic. All right, example, we have bacteria, blue algae. In Protista, we have the protozoas, which are the animal-like, and the protophyta, which are the plant-like. Examples of which we have the amoeba, Iglena, paramecium, even the glabulinemas. Then we have fungi, for example, mushroom and rhizopus. And we also have plantae, where we have Thallophyta, made up of thallus and filaments, e.g. the Spirogyra, Bryophyta, Pteridophyta, and Spermatophyta, where we now have gymnosperm and the angiosperms, and under the angiosperms we now have the monocot and the dicot, and lastly kingdom animalia, where we have invertebrates and vertebrates. Right, so for the invertebrate part, we have the coelenterata, the platyhelminths, nematoda, you can see all that. Then we have the vertebrates, where we have pixies, amphibians, reptilia, alps, and mammals. Alright, so from these sections, you should be able to analyze external features and characteristics of the listed organisms. Alright, so that's for the listed organisms, for example, bacteria, blue-green algae, amoeba, Iglena, paramecium. That's those organisms that were given as examples of this kingdom. You should study their diagram very well and know the characteristics of each labeled part of the diagram. Then you should be able to apply the knowledge from one above to demonstrate increase in structural complexity. Alright, so you can see that as you are progressing from Monera to Protista to fungi, there is an increase in structural complexity. Right, you should be able to apply the knowledge. Okay, it was this year and then it became this year. So you are applying that knowledge to demonstrate increase in structural complexity, then trace the stages in the life history of the listed organisms. Alright, so this has to do with you understanding the life cycle of these listed organisms as well. For example, we could have alternation of generation in some. Then apply the knowledge of the life history to demonstrate gradual transition from life in water to life on land. Specifically, all that, yes. Then if you want to look down into the kingdom plateau, for example, even the kingdom animalia, where we have fishes first before we had the amphibians, before we had reptiles and all that. Even in the plantain aspect, where we have the talophyta to the bryophyta to the pteridophyta, then down to the spermatophyta. Alright, so you can see the gradual transition of life from life in water to life on land. Alright, then trace the evolution of the listed plants. I just even talked about that, and even that of vertebrates, even invertebrate animals as well. Then you also say we should determine the economic importance of the insects studied. Okay, for the insects studied, we have the millipede, ticks, mosquito, cockroach, housefly, bee, and butterfly. So you just have to study and it's also good to know their diagrams. It's also good to know the diagrams. Cockroach, study the diagram, the mouth parts, yeah, and all that. Then it still says we should trace the evolution of multicellular animals. I talked about that. Determine their economic importance. Alright, so that's that about chapter 2 under that section A. Then section B is just about adaptation, where we have structural behavioral adaptation of vertebrates to the environment. You know what adaptation is? How they, possess characteristics that help them, that enable them to survive in unfavorable conditions and all that. It helps them align with the environment. So for that, we are to describe how the various structure and behaviors adapt these organisms to their environment. For example, possession of scales and all that, amniotic eggs and all that. So that's what you are studying, that's what you are looking at here, structural behavioral adaptation of vertebrates to the environment. Now to section B, where we have forms and function. Number one, we have to study the internal structure of a flowering plant, which is divided into the root, stem, leaf, all right, and the internal structure of a mammal. All right, so we should be able, as candidates, should be able to identify the transverse section of these organs here. The transverse section, specifically transverse section of the monocot stem and root and the dicot stem and root, right? Then for the leaf, we should also be able to identify the section, because you could have, for example, the mesophyll, the palisade mesophyll, spongy, all those things. You need to know the guard cells. These are things you need to know. So it is important to study the diagrams, right? It's important to study diagrams and also know the function and how they operate. Then relate the structure of these organs to their functions. Yes, that's know how they would operate. Then for the mammal now, you should be able to examine the arrangement of the mammalian internal organs and describe the appearance and position of digestive, reproductive, and excretory organs. Alright, then now to chapter 2, where we have nutrition, where we have modes of nutrition as autotrophic and heterotrophic nutrition. Alright, then we also have types of nutrition. Mode of nutrition is different from what types of nutrition. So You should be able to compare the photosynthetic and the chemosynthetic modes of nutrition, to compare, that's to contrast it. For example, where we could have direct sunlight, helping the plants to produce food, and then we could have the plants still trying to reduce or oxidize all the carbon dioxide to gain food. All right, so that's how to compare and contrast. Then provide examples from both flowering and non-flowering plants. All right, then compare autotrophic and heterotrophic modes of nutrition. Autotrophic has to do with something that produces itself. Heterotrophic has to do with you eating a ready-made food. And autotrophic is specific to mostly plants, while heterotrophic is specific to like animals and all that. Alright, then based on the types of nutrition, you should be able to differentiate the following examples: holozoic, parasitic, saprophytic, carnivorous, and then determine their nutritional value. Alright, so we have a lot of examples here. You will see this file in the description. You see a link to this file in the description. You can get it from there. Alright, this is a well detailed file, and that's why I actually handpicked it to do this video. So we have examples of that. Then plant nutrition, where we have photosynthesis, mineral requirements, very very important, underrated topic, and it's usually confusing. You just have to know. All right, where we have the macro and the micronutrients. So under photosynthesis, you should be able to analyze the light and dark reactions, materials and conditions necessary for what photosynthesis, also the equation. Then determine the necessity of light, carbon dioxide and chlorophyll in photosynthesis, still the same as number one. Then detect the presence of starch in leaf as an evidence of photosynthesis. Well, I always advise, if you are using modern biology, it gives you a whole cover of all that is here. Then for the mineral requirements, you are to identify micro and macro elements required by plants, know their functions, very important, and then determine the deficiency systems of NPK. NPK is mostly used for fertilizers, so it's like a very very important part. Even apart from this NPK, you still have to know that of some like magnesium, and some others like that. Then you know that copper, okay, copper is a micro, you just have to know that. Then down to animal nutrition, we have classes of food substances. We have carbohydrate, protein, fat and oil, vitamins, minerals, salt and water. And we also have food tests. We also have the mammalian tooth. Then we also have, there's a whole lot here. Then we also have mammalian alimentary canal and nutrition process. So we have ingestion, digestion, absorption, and assimilation of digested food. Alright, so under these sections of this chapter, you should be able to indicate the sources of the various classes of food, relate the importance of each class, determine the importance of a balanced diet. Alright, so that's just a very very common thing you should have been doing from your junior secondary school. And then you should also be able to detect the presence of the listed food items from the result of a given experiment. That's why you have to use a comprehensive textbook, because most some that I don't want to say most, but some textbooks lack a lot of these experiments. These experiments you will not be able to perform them. So you actually need like a report. So that's why I always advise, go with a textbook that has a report of all these experiments that are needed. Then now under the mammalian tooth, you should be able to describe the structure of a typical mammalian tooth, that of a dog, a cow, a human being. Then differentiate the types of mammalian tooth and relate their structure to their function. Compare the dental formula of man, sheep, and dog. Even rabbit, you could see rabbit sometimes. The different types of mammalian tooth, where we have the canine, the incisor, the molar, the premolar, right? And the numbers as well could also be important. Then under the alimentary canal, you should be able to relate the structure of various components of the alimentary canal and its accessory organ to their functions. Okay, then identify the general characteristics of digestive enzymes, how digestion works. You should know that, how it moves through peristalsis and all that. Then associate enzymes with digestion of carbohydrate, protein, and fat. Determine the end product of these classes of food. All right, so those are important those are important aspects under this that you should go through. Then for transport, where we have need for transport, materials for transport, which could be excretory product, gases, manufactured food, digested food, nutrients, water, and hormones. Channels for transportation, mammalian circulatory system, heart, arteries, vein, and capillaries. And plant vascular system, phloem, and the xylem. Alright, so under this section, you should be able to determine the relationship between increase in size and complexity and the need for the development of a transport system. Okay, we know that simple living organisms like the amoeba, they simply do diffusion, simply do osmosis, and then they are good to go. But human beings and human beings is even at the highest level. Let's bring it down to some other organisms, that have a large volume to surface ratio. Alright, so they actually need a system to transport, where we have mass flow, whereby we have a liquid carrying them from one place to another. Alright, so that is that you read it in your textbook. Then you should also be able to determine the sources of materials and the forms in which they are transported. Then describe the general circulatory system. Yes. Then compare specific structure of the hepatic portal vein. You see they are listing the veins for you and the vessels you are to study specifically. The pulmonary vein and artery, aorta, and the renal artery and vein. Also study the diagrams. It's very, very important. Know which one comes first in a diagram, maybe it's the vein or the artery, because sometimes you could be given a black and white diagram. It will not be easy for you to know the vein and the artery, because they both be in the same black colors. So it is important to study the diagram very, very well. And then describing the general circulatory system, you should know the open and the close, you should know the single and the double, the pulmonary and the systemic in those I have. Then under plant vascular system, you should be able to identify the organs of the plant vascular system, compare the specific functions of the phloem and the xylem. Then lastly, where we have media and process of mechanism for transportation. There we should be able to identify media of transportation, where I talked about mass flow. So we could have it as the cytoplasm, cell sap, body fluid, blood or lymph, carrying them from one place to another. Then determine the composition of blood and lymph, describe diffusion, osmosis, plasmolysis, and turbidity as mechanism of transportation in organisms. Compare the various mechanisms of open circulatory system, transportation flow, blah 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 blah, as mechanisms of transportation in plants. Right? So that's just you. We are all good. You're just going to see everything in the same place. I just have to read through. Then number four, here we have respiration, where we have respiratory organs and surfaces, mechanisms of gaseous exchange in plants and animals, aerobic respiration, anaerobic respiration. Alright, so under this respiration, you should be able to examine the significance of respiration for exchange of gases and supply of energy, describe the process of glycolysis, compare the similarities of the process in plants and animals, deduce from an experience set of gaseous exchange and production of heat energy during respiration. Alright, so that's why I'm still going to emphasize on the need to read from a textbook. I would always recommend modern biology because I used it. So we should also be able to describe the following respiratory organ and surfaces with organisms in which they occur. Number one, we have body surface, we have gill, we have trachea, lungs, stomata, and lenticles and lenticels. Alright, so we should also be able to relate the characteristics of the respiratory surfaces listed above to their functions. Then I think our time is fast spent. You should be able to describe mechanism for the opening and closing of the stomata and time respiratory movement in these animals, right? So the stomata are talking about the plants, and respiratory movements for animals. So we have um we have some other organs involved, where we have the diaphragm, where we have increasing the volume of the lungs and all that. So under aerobic respiration has to do with respiration that needs air, anaerobic absence of air. Right. So examine the role of oxygen in the liberation of energy for the activities of living organisms. This is the effect of insufficient supply of oxygen to the muscles. Then under anaerobic respiration, use yeast cells and sugar situation to demonstrate the process of fermentation and then assess the economic importance of this. That's why I always emphasize. You can see here's another experiment which you would not be able to perform. You need a report. Then we have excretion now. Down to excretion, we have types of excretory structures. We have contractile vacuole, flame cell, nephridium, malphigian tubules, kidney, stoma and lenticule. Alright, then we also have excretory mechanisms, kidney, lungs, and skin, excretory products of plants. Alright, so under this the chapters, that you should be able to interpret the meaning and significance of excretion, alright, metabolic waste product and all that, identify the characters of each structure, right? So they've listed the structure. Contractile vacuole, that could be found in mostly the protista, where we like, for example, the amoeba paramecium, the flame cell in flatworms and all that, nephridium in roundworms, malphigian tubules for plants, kidney for humans, stoma lentic cells for plants. Alright, so you should be able to relate the structure of the kidney to the excretory and the osmoregulatory function, identify the function and excretory product of the lungs and skin. Alright, so that's very, very important. Osmoregulatory function is specifically to the kidneys, alright, where we have filtration, selective reabsorption, and all that. So it's all there. Just read through that chapter. Then under support and movement, which is the next topic, where we have tropic, tactic, nastic, and sleep movement in plant. We also have supporting tissues in animals, types and functions of skeleton in animals. So under this, you should be able to, here it's talking about support and movement. Alright, support and movement. You should be able to determine the need for support and movement in organisms, identify supporting tissues in plants, for example, the collenchyma, the sclerenchyma, xylem, and phloem fibers. You be able to describe the distribution of supporting tissues in root, stem, and leaf. So you can relate the response of plants to stimuli of light, water, gravity, and thought. Identify the regions of growth. Alright, here you could also have to deal with some hormones. Relate the location of chitin, cartilage, and bone to their supporting function. Also now is under skeleton, which is the framework of the body. It helps give support and enhances movement. So you should be able to relate the structure and the general layout of the mammalian skeleton to their supportive, locomotive, and respiratory function, and differentiate different types of joints using appropriate examples. Alright, then you should be able to apply supportive, protective, supportive, locomotive, and respiratory function of the skeleton to the well-being of the animal, protecting internal organs and all that. Yes, very, very important. Alright, then down to reproduction, where we have asexual reproduction, as in fusion in paramecium, budding in yeast, natural vegetative propagation, and artificial vegetative propagation. And then we also have sexual reproduction in flowering plants. Oh my god, this is actually a lot, but trust me when I say you can do it. Then we have floral parts and their functions, pollination and fertilization, products of sexual reproduction. Okay, so for the asexual reproduction, she will be able to differentiate between it and sexual reproduction. I know that sex gametes are involved in one and sex gametes are not involved in one. Alright. Apply natural vegetative propagation in crop production and multiplication. Apply grafting, budding, layering in agricultural practices. So they've given you examples already of artificial vegetative propagation. So it's left for you to read up on that. Then for sexual reproduction, that's in flowering plants, she should be able to relate parts of the flower to their functions and productive processes, then deduce the advantages of cross pollination and the different types of placentation that develop into simple aggregate, multiple, and succulent fruits. Right, so that's another important part. If you do past question a lot, you must have seen a lot on that particular aspect that has to do with placentation. Alright, then in mammals now, you should be able to differentiate between male and female reproductive organs and relate their structure and function to the production of offsprings. Then describe fusion of gametes as a process of fertilization and relate the effect of the mother's health, nutrition, and indiscriminate use of drugs on the developmental stages of the embryo up to birth. Alright, so this is also important. It's also important here you study the organs and everything that is involved, as well as their function in the reproduction of mammals. Alright, so we could have the placenta and all that, the functions and all that. Now down to growth, we have meaning of growth, germination of seeds and conditions necessary for germination of seed. Alright, so apply the knowledge of the condition necessary for germination on plant growth and differentiate between epigyle and hypogyle germination. Alright, so growth increase in dry, some could say increase in dry mass due to the add-up of protoplasmic materials in the cell. Now we know that the protoplasm is made up of the nucleus and the cytoplasm. Take that as a tip. But then you should be able to apply this knowledge in the um germination of plants. Yes, for example, we could also have the epigyle and the hypogyle. Alright, so that's talking about the epicotyl and the hypocotyl, which of them elongates first. Alright, then down to coordination and control, you have nervous coordination. Alright, so under this we have the components, structure and functions of the CNS, the of the PNS as well, the mechanism of transmission of impulses, reflex action. So you should be able to apply the knowledge of the structure and function of the CNS in the coordination of body functions in organisms. Illustrate reflex actions, that's actions you can't control, involuntary actions such as blinking of the eyes, knee jerk, etc. Then differentiate between reflex, which are also called involuntary, and voluntary actions, as well as conditioned reflexes such as salivation, riding a bicycle, and swimming. Then we also have the sense organ, we have the skin, which is tactile, we have the nose, which is olfactory, the tongue for taste, eye for sight, ear for auditory. Alright, so you should be able to associate the listed sense organ with their functions. Also, it is important to study their diagram, know where the middle ear is, the inner ear, know about the ear ossicles and all that, then apply the knowledge of the structure and function of these sense organs in detecting and correcting their effect. In terms of correcting effect, you have to like focus on this eye, where we have long sightedness, short sightedness, presbyopia, cataract, astigmatism, and all that. Right, then we come down to hormonal control, where we have ductless gland and all that. So under this we have the animal and the plant hormones. Alright, so for the animal hormonal system we have the pituitary, which is the master gland, the thyroid, parathyroid, adrenal, pancreas, and gonads. Alright, then for the plants we have the phytohormones. Alright, then we have examples on this other side, which says to examine the effect of various phytohormones, for example, auxin, gibberellin, cytokinin, ethylene on growth, tropism, flowering, fruit ripening, and leaf abscission. Alright, then on the animal aspect, you should be able to locate the listed endocrine glands in animals, know where they are located, know to what organ they are closely located, for the example, the adrenals, the kidneys, and all that. Then relate the hormone produced by each of these glands to their functions. Then lastly, homeostasis, where we have body temperature regulation, salt and water regulation. And under this, you should be able to relate the function of hormones to regulating the levels of materials inside the body. Now down to section C, where we have ecology, we have factors affecting distribution of organisms, where we have abiotic, and under this you should be able to deduce the effect of temperature, rainfall, relative humidity, wind speed and direction, altitude, salinity, turbidity, pH, and edaphic conditions on the distribution of organisms. Then use appropriate equipment to measure abiotic factors, for example, the circuit disc, the thermometer, and the rain gauge. Alright, so these are, although there are still a whole lot of some other equipments which you will see in your textbook, you just have to go through them. Alright, it's very important. Then the biotic, where we have the activities of plants and animals, particularly human, affecting the distribution of organisms. Then we come down to symbiotic interaction of plants and animals. So symbiotic has to do with two. Alright, so under this you could have symbiosis, parasitism, saprophytism, commensalism, mutualism, amensalism, competition, predation, and cooperation among organisms. So we also could have the plus and minus for this. We could also have the plus and minus for this. For example, symbiosis, you could have symbiosis just between two organisms, could be benefiting or not just organisms. Parasitism, one is benefiting at the expense of others. Saprophytism involves only one, commensalism, mutualism, both competition, predation. Then associate the distribution of organisms with food chains and food webs in particular habitats. Right, so food chain is just like a linear sequence, while food web we have a whole lot of different, you know, different linkages. Then we have on the left hand side food chain, food webs, and trophic levels, energy flow in the ecosystem, nutrient cycling in nature. Very, very important aspect of this carbon cycle, water cycle, nitrogen cycle. Very, very important. You have to study that cycle very well. And it won't actually take your time, just need to understand it. Then under the food chain and under the energy flow in the ecosystem, you should be able to interpret the ecological um, pyramid of numbers, biomass, and energy. Yes, very, very important. Then under the nuclear cycle in nature, you should be able to describe the cycle and the significance, including the balance of atmospheric oxygen and carbon dioxide for the carbon cycle, assess the effect of water cycle on other nutrient cycle, and relate the roles of bacteria and leguminous plants in the cycling of nitrogen, even lightning. Yes, you have to know all that. Then we have natural habitat. Here we are talking about ecology, don't forget. So everything here is under ecology. Where we have the aquatic, the terrestrial, arboreal. Alright, so for the arboreal, we are talking about those like the monkeys who fly up and down. Not really like fly, who jump on trees. Then under this aspect, you should be able to associate plants and animals with each of these habitats, relate adaptive features to the habitat in which an organism lives. Right then, the local Nigerian biomes, this is in the Nigerian exam. All right, so here we have tropical rainforest. Actually, you have to study tropical rainforest as a whole itself, then bring it down to the states in Nigeria. All right, so locate biomes to regions, apply the knowledge of the features of the listed local biomes to determine the characteristics of different regions of Nigeria. Then we also have Guinea Sava, Sudan Savannah, deserts, highlands of mountain forests, and the grassland of Obudu, Jos, Mambulea, and Plateau. Then lastly, we have, okay, not lastly, we still have soil there before. Oh my God. Ecology is this broad. Well, it's just something you can cover, I believe. So, ecology of population, we have population density and overcrowding. Then we should be able to determine the reasons for rapid changes in human population, the consequences of overcrowding, compute or calculate density as the number of organisms per unit area, apply modern methods to control human population. Then we also have factors affecting population sizes, biotic and abiotic. Under this, you should be able to deduce the effect of these factors on the size of population and determine the interactions between biotic and abiotic factors. We have a whole lot of this. Say, for example, scarcity of water, drought, which leads to food shortage and lack of space, which causes increase in disease rate, alright, thereby giving increase in mortality rates. Then we have a lower population. Then we have ecological succession where we have primary succession and secondary succession. Should be able to trace the sequence in succession to the climate stage of stability in plant production. So that climate stage is the stage whereby everything is just like settled, like final destination kind of thing. And for the primary succession, we could have chance, just coming to start the pioneer organisms and all that. Then we have soil, characteristics of different types of soil, the sandy, loamy, clay, soil structure, porosity, capillarity, and humus content. Then the component of the soil, that's the inorganic component, organic component, and soil organisms. So under this topic, you should be able to identify physical properties of different soil types based on simple measurement of particle size, porosity, or water retention ability, and then determine the amount of air, water, humus, and capillarity in different soil types experimentally. They put it here experimentally. That's why I always say go for a good textbook that can help you with all the experiments that you need to be knowledge about. Then you should also be able to relate soil characteristics, types, and components to the healthy growth of plants. Know which of them is best for plant growth. Then we have soil fertility. Relate such factors as loss of inorganic matter, compaction, leaching, erosion of the topsoil, and repeated cropping with one variety. Then renewal and maintenance of soil fertility, where we have the knowledge being applied on the practice of contour ridging, terracing, mulching, polycropping, strip cropping. use of organic and inorganic fertilizers, crop rotation, shifting cultivation, etc. is actually a whole lot. And if by God's grace and chance, I'm still going to drop more videos that will help you understand these particular aspects. Right. So number seven, we have humans and environment, where we have diseases, common and endemic diseases, is it transmissible disease and disease syndromes such as poliomyelitis, cholera, tuberculosis, STDs, for example, gonorrhea, syphilis, AIDS. Then under this, you should be able to identify ecological conditions that favor the spread of common endemic and potentially epidemic diseases such as malaria, meningitis, draculiasis, schistosomiasis, onchocerciasis, typhoid fever and cholera, etc. Then relate the biology of the vector, very very important, or agent of each disease which is spread and control. Then use the knowledge of the causative organism, mode of transmitted, of deleted disease to their prevention, treatment and control. And lastly, apply the principles of inoculation and vaccination on disease prevention. Very very important. Right, this is something that we need to like know, like it will help you. It will help you know those vaccines and confirm from your parents if you took those vaccines. If not, you do the right thing. Then we have pollution and its control. We are talking about humans and its environment. So here we have sources, types, effect, and methods of control. So it says to categorize pollution into air, water, and soil pollution, relate the effect of common pollutants to human health and environmental degradation, and then determine the methods by which each pollutant may be controlled. Right, then sanitation and sewage, whereby you have to examine the importance of sanitation with emphasis on sewage disposal, community health, and personal hygiene, and assess the roles and function of international and national health agencies such as WHO, UNICEF, IRCS, and Ministries of Health and Environment. Then lastly, we have con- conservation of natural resources. Alright, so this is like a scarce, it's actually scarce, and most times the question that comes out has to do with agencies involved. And if you are smart, as I assume you are, you can just look at it and think, but it's good you go through, it's good you read it and know how to apply the various methods of conservation of both the renewable and non-renewable natural resources for the protection of our environment for present and future generations. Outline the benefit of conserving natural resources, identify the bodies responsible for the conservation of resources at the national and international levels. We have a lot of examples: NCF, WWF, IUCN, UNEP, and also assess their activities. Then under genetics, we have variation in population, where we also have morphological variation in the physical appearance of individuals, for example, size, color, fingerprint. Then physiological variation, that's based on function, yeah, ability to roll the tongue, ability to taste PTC and blood groups. Alright, so under morphological variation, she wants to differentiate between continuous and discontinuous variations with examples. Relate the role of environmental conditions, habitats, and genetic constitution to variation, and then measure height and weight of pupils. Alright, so that's just for that. Then under the physiological variation, you should be able to identify some specific examples of physiological variation among human population, categorize people according to their physiological variation, and then application of discontinuous variation in crime detection, blood transfusion, and determination of paternity. Right, so you should be able to apply the knowledge of blood group. First of all, that means you need to know blood group, right? So you have to know that before you are being able to apply the knowledge of this in blood transfusion and determination of paternity, and also in crime detection. For example, usually most especially in cases of rape and fingerprints and all that. Then hereditary, there's a inheritance of characters in organisms, heritable and non-heritable characters. Chromosomes, the basis of hereditary structure of the chromosome, process of transmission of hereditary characters. from parent to offspring, collaborating genetically and sex determination, and application in the principles of heredity in agriculture, medicine, and lastly, sex-linked characters. That's X-linked characters, sex-linked characters. For example, baldness, hemophilia, color blindness. You see, we are coming back there. Alright, so you should be able to determine heritable and non-heritable characters with examples, know what is heritable. For example, due to an accident, somebody lost an eye, you know that that's not heritable, right? So he actually lost his eye. You don't expect. Alright, so you want to determine how with examples, illustrate simple structure of DNA. Yes, know the components of that DNA. Alright, the ATGC, know all those things. Alright, then illustrate segregation of genes at meiosis and recombination of genes as fertilization to account for the process of transmission of characters from parents to offspring. So it's very important to understand this. There are two major, how do I call it? This meiosis and mitosis. I also have videos on that. You can actually scroll down. Very, very. In fact, once you watch that video, you understand it very, very well. I'm actually not the owner of that video, but I had to post it because it helped me understand at my own time. Alright, then you should be able to analyze data on cross-breeding experiments and all that. So you just need to read through on that. Then lastly, evolution, adaptation for survival, factors that bring about competition, intra and interspecific competition. Under that, it will be able to, determine niche differentiation as a means of reducing intraspecific competition, and about factors that bring about competition. You should be able to relate increase in population, shortage of food and space with inter and intra-specific competition. Then relationship between competition and succession. Relate competition to succession such that competition is very, very necessary for what succession, right? It helps only the brave, or what do they call it? It helps. It's just like a survival of the fittest thing. So only the fittest will survive, and by so doing, they actually are with more favorable characteristics which are being improved on. And we also have structural adaptation in organisms. You should be able to account for adaptation in organisms with respect to obtaining food, protection and defense, securing mates, regulating body temperature, conserving water. Alright, so they are all together. You're going to see them all together. Very, very important. Before we talked about we talked about structural and behavioral adaptation, if you remember as well. Then we also have adaptive coloration and dysfunction. That's categorized counter shading in fish, toads, and snakes, and warning coloration in mushrooms. Right, so we have a whole lot. We have mimicry, we have the Batesian mimicry, then behavioral adaptation in social animals. So that is, you're going to be looking at some social animals. That it says here differentiate various castes in social insects like the termite and their function in their colon or hive, like the termite, the bee also. And you should also be able to identify the structure of a male, female bee and all that. Then account for basking in lizard territorial behavior of other animals under unfavorable conditions such as hibernation and activation. Then theories of evolution, where we have the Lamarck's theory and the Darwin's theory. Alright, she also relates organic evolution as the sum total of all adaptive changes that have taken place over a long period of time, resulting in the diversity of forms, structure, and functions among organisms, and examine the contribution of Lamarck and Darwin to the theory of evolution. Very, very important. You see this Lamarck theory, no, it's very, very well. Darwin's theory, the same. Alright, so Darwin's theory has to do with like the survival of the fittest, while Lamarck's theory has to do with although it was opposed, it has to do with the inheritance of acquired parts. Mhm. Then we have evidence of evolution. Candidates should be able to provide evidence for evolution such as fossil records, comparative anatomy, physiology, and embryology. Then trace evolutionary trends in plants and animals and provide evidence for modern evolutionary theories such as genetic studies and the role of mutation. Alright, so that is the detailed syllabus for biology. You have to understand that. And then I actually I recommend the syllabus, and most times the textbooks you use are based on the syllabus, but I prefer you read the whole textbook, because in the course of preparing the syllabus and preparing the questions, they may likely not just go through the syllabus. They could just pick randomly from any textbook, from any part of any textbook. All right, so you could be lucky to have two or three more textbooks to replicate that part which is not, listed in the syllabus as we just discussed. So here are actually some recommended texts. Here are some recommended texts: comprehensive certificate biology for senior secondary school, exam focused biology for WAECs and GME second edition, success in biology, senior secondary school biology, essential of biology, biology for senior secondary school, modern biology. I would have picked modern biology as my number one. Functional approach in biology, modern biology for secondary schools, biology for senior secondary schools, biology for West African schools, and handbook of practical biology, second edition, and wisdom line pass at once, Jamb. All right, I'm actually wishing you the best in your examination, and then I'm still going to drop a video on why most people fail biology. Actually, I observed that it gives engineering students an edge to become the top or highest scorers, because medical students or students who take biology always get lower scores in biology. So see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.